Hello students, welcome to today's class. Today we are going to talk about cognitive development. The main objectives in this lesson are to understand first Piaget's theory of cognitive development, skills of formal operational stage and also the concept of adolescent egocentrism. Piaget's theory of cognitive development is a very popular theory. You must have already learnt about this theory in last semester. But in this lesson, the main emphasis is on formal operational stage as we are going to focus mainly on adolescent behavior. Jean Piaget is a Swiss-born psychologist who was the first to make a systematic study of the acquisition of understanding in children. He was a zoologist by profession. He started working with Alfred Binet on intelligence tests, and because of his interest, he also studied child development with a focus on cognitive development. Piaget is also known as radical constructivist. Piaget has explained and discussed the different stages of cognitive development. He believed that cognitive development takes place through 4 fundamental stages. All children have to pass through these stages to reach to the next higher level of cognitive thinking. Now let us see what are some of the important factors of Piaget's theory that influence how children learn and grow. First is schema. Schema describes both the physical and actions involved in understanding and knowing. According to Piaget, we have a system for organizing information in our mind, and we do organize information and experiences in our mental system under different categories. The mental system and the categories are known as schema. Then the second concept is adaptation. According to Piaget, how we adjust with the environment, and he calls this process as adaptation. Adaptation has 2 sub-processes. These are, first is assimilation. Assimilation is the process of taking new information and fitting the new knowledge or information into the already existing schema. Then the second concept is accommodation. This involves changing or altering the existing schema for the light of new information. Sometimes we see that existing schema does not support new information. In such a situation, we generally do 2 things. Firstly, we alter the existing schema, and secondly, we create a new schema. This process is known as accommodation. Then the next important concept is equilibration. The ongoing process through which a child tries to create a balance between assimilation and accommodation is known as equilibration. This process, as I told you, is equilibration. Now next let us talk about Piaget's stages of child development. Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development is divided into 4 major stages. First is sensory motor stage, which runs from 0 to 2 years. Then there is pre-operational stage, in which the child is 2 to 7 years. The third stage is called as concrete operational stage for the ages 7 to 11-year-old children. Then finally, it is formal operational stage, which is from 11 years through adulthood. Let us get into details of these stages. First is the sensory motor stage, which is from birth to 2 years. The main characteristics of this stage of development basically are, first is that it involves the senses and motor activities, hence the name sensory motor stage. Second is, children do reflexive activities such as sucking and grasping in this stage. The child observes and imitates his or her surroundings in this particular stage. Thought and memory also start to develop very systematically. In this stage, children learn to recognize objects and understand that objects have their separate permanent existence. As infants grow older, they learn that even if an object is not in front of them, it still exists. Piaget called it as object permanence. It is also known as out of sight, out of mind. Children also learn to work in a particular direction, catching a particular thing which they are asked to catch, playing with puzzles and so on are the common activities they learn to do in this particular stage. They move from simple to complex logical action and thinking. The goal directed thinking helps them to progress to a higher level schema to achieve a goal. The sensory motor stage is further divided into 6 sub-stages. These stages are: first is stages of reflex activities. From 0 to 1 month is the age. The infant, inborn reflexes such as sucking and looking help the child to understand the surroundings in this particular stage. Then there is primary circular reactions which happens from first month to 4 months. Sensations and schemas get coordinated in this stage. Whatever children do in this stage, they tend to do it repeatedly as they derive pleasure from doing so. For example, if a child starts sucking thumb, he or she will continue with this action because it gives the child a soothing feeling. The third stage is secondary circular reactions, which runs from 4 months to 8 months. Younger children become more focused on doing actions. They repeat their actions to get a response from the environment. Then the fourth substage is coordination of reaction, which is 8 months to 12 months. In this stage, children learn to make a difference between goal and means. They also develop ways to achieve their goals. They also try to generalize the learning and try to use it from one situation to another. Then comes the fifth stage, which is tertiary circular reactions, which is 12 months to 18 months. This is a stage of trial and error. Children explore the things around them. They make mistakes and also tend to repeat these mistakes. This stage is very important as children learn to be confident in this particular stage. They repeat many actions because they want attention from their caregiver. Then comes the final stage here, early representational thought, which is from 18 months to 24 months. Children start focusing more on mental activities rather than physical actions, and they start thinking about objects. At this age, they show the ability to recognize object permanence. They search for a toy even if it is not in their sight. Then comes the second stage, which is the pre-operational stage. This age is from 2 to 7 years. The main characteristics of this particular stage involves that children begin to process their thought at this stage, although in a manner that is far less efficient than the logical thought processing of adults. Then their vocabulary expands and develops during this time because they change their working style and habits and start behaving like little adults. This stage is known as pre-operational stage of cognitive development. It is called pre because in this stage children cannot perform a logical operation, but it is a starting stage of logical operation. This stage is categorized into 2 parts. First is pre-conceptual stage from 2 years to 4 years and intuitive stage, which is 4 years to 7 years. The vocabulary of children expands and develops during this time because they change their working style and habits and start behaving like little adults. Some of the other important characteristics of this stage are: first is egocentrism. Egocentrism is one of the main characteristics of pre-operational stage. Children focus on their perspectives and feel that they are correct. They also believe that others also share the same perspective because they think that it is only perspective that exists. But gradually they understand that there are many perspectives, and Piaget called it as decentering. They start believing that they are not at the center of everything. Then there is the next concept, animism, which is also a characteristic of pre-operational stage. It is a characteristic by which children believe that all objects, or things are living and has some consciousness. An example of this is that children often believe that a table also feels pain if it is hit or kicked. A car does not get started because it is tired, and so on. A child believes that everyone is like him or her. In this stage, children also develop the ability to use symbols, language, pictures, signs or gestures to represent actions or objects mentally. Piaget called this semiotic function or symbolism. Along with this, their ideas of right and wrong are governed by the people around them. They generally focus on one aspect at a time and cannot think of any other possible situation. This is called as moral realism. This moral realism makes them believe and respect rules and authority. Children are not equipped for certain functions at this stage. For example, they cannot do reversible thinking. While children can do simple logical operations, they face difficulty in understanding reverse counting, say extended family, relation tree, and so on. Along with reversibility, they also face difficulty in conservation of various concepts such as height and width. Conservation is a principle according to which some characteristic of an object remain the same despite the change in its appearance. A famous example of conservation is that regarding the conservation of volume, where children said that glass with more height has more water than the other glass, although the volume of water was same in both the glasses. Such examples show that children can think only in one direction and face difficulty in conservation of various concepts. The third stage of Piaget's theory is the concrete operational stage, which is for children from 7 years to 11 years old. The main characteristic of concrete operational stage is basically children can do operations on concrete objects and situations. However, they will find it hard to solve something like abstract problems and have difficulty with words like assume that relate to mental conjecture. They can do logical thinking if they are allowed to manipulate objects. By comparison, however, it is seen that thoughts can be manipulated and the presence of the object is not necessary for the thought to take place in the formal operational stage. They start thinking more like mature people and rarely believe in animism and egocentrism. However, there may be few exceptions where some children continue to hold onto these fixations, as do some people who carry them well into their adulthood also. During the concrete operational stage, children gradually develop the ability to conserve or learn that objects are not always the way that they appear to be. They start taking many perspectives about concepts. They begin to develop the ability to understand identity, compensation, and reversibility. Once children have learned to conserve, they also learn that objects remain the same even after changing in colors, etc. For example, they learn that if they spread out pencils on the floor, there are still as many as there were before, even though they look different. Children learn many things in this stage concerning conservation, such as classification, grouping objects into categories, seriation, arranging of objects in sequential order according to one aspect such as size, weight or volume. Then the final stage of Piaget's theory is the formal operational stage, which is from 11 years to adulthood. So basically an adolescent is in the formal operational stage. The main characteristic of this stage is basically, this is the final stage of Piaget's cognitive development. Children become capable of abstract thinking and can understand the combination and coordination of numbers and variables. They develop something called as formal operational thought. Children move ahead from concrete objects to abstract concepts. They also develop a logical system of intelligence and try to incorporate all possible solutions while working on a problem. They also learn to coordinate between different variables. Children in this stage use something called as formal operations problem solving strategy, in which an individual begins by identifying all the factors that might affect a problem and then deduces them systematically. Piaget calls it as hypothetical deductive reasoning. This stage permits adolescents to reason beyond a world of concrete reality to a world of possibilities. Sometimes they just live in a world of imagination with no concern about the real world also. There are basically 6 conceptual skills which emerge during the stage of formal operations. Each one of it has own implication for how adolescents approach interpersonal relationships and formulation of personal plans and goals, as well as how they analyze scientific and mathematical information. First skill is where adolescents are able to manipulate mentally more than 2 categories of variables at the same time. For example, for planning a trip, they can consider the relationship of speed, distance and also time. Then the second skill is they are able to think about things changing in the future. For example, they can realize that their current friendships may not be remaining the same in the future. The third skill is that they are able to hypothesize about logical sequence of possible events. Here, for example, they are able to predict college and occupational options that may be open for them. Then they are able to anticipate consequences of their actions. For example, they can realize that if they drop out of school, certain career possibilities will be closed. Next, they have the capacity to detect the logical consistency or inconsistency in a set of statements. They can test the truth of a statement by finding evidence that supports or disapproves it. Then the sixth skill is that they are able to think in a relativistic way about themselves, other individuals and also about their world. They know that they are expected to behave in accordance with the norms of their families, communities and culture. They also know that different families, communities and cultures have different norms. It is easy for them to accept as a member of other culture. Now let us talk about implications of formal thought. First, it will prepare an ideal to gain a sense of identity, think in more complex ways about moral issues and understand other people. It helps to think more independently, imagine alternatives to present realities and raise questions about everything from why parents set rules to where there is injustice in the world. Formal thought also makes people capable of understanding concepts like negative numbers and infinity. For example, they can understand the temperatures below zero and how two parallel lines never touch, etc. because they can now use proportions in their reasoning. They can study and understand fractions, ratios and decimals, and they can use such proportions to solve many problems. They can also understand how the world might be different, that is better than existing situations. So, they exhibit some idealism about social, political, religious and also ethical issues. Piaget suggested that adolescent idealism reflects formal operational egocentrism. It is an ability to separate one's own logical abstraction from perspective of other from practical consideration. Piaget believes that children overcome egocentrism, but they still tend to believe that everyone shares similar thoughts, feelings and concerns. They wonder why people do not understand their needs and perspectives, and therefore they develop adolescent egocentrism. They feel that everyone notices them, what they do, how they walk, how they talk and so on. Piaget has also said that children develop an imaginary audience and think they are being observed by people. They spend a lot of time in front of mirror before they go out basically. Now let us understand in detail what is adolescence egocentrism. It was David Ilkin in the year 1967 who proposed that formal operational thought also leads to adolescence egocentrism, that is difficulty in differentiating one's own thoughts and feelings from those of other people. Adolescents reflect an enhanced ability about one's own thoughts. Therefore, he identified two types of adolescent egocentrism. The two distorted images of relation between self and others. First is the imagery audience. Adolescents believe that they are focus of everyone else's attention. They believe that everyone around them is monitoring their performance. A critical remark from their parent or teacher can be a very mortifying event for them. It is a product of inability to differentiate between self and others. As a result, they become extremely self-conscious, often going to great length to avoid embarrassment. Then next one is personal fable. A tendency of adolescent to think that their thoughts and feelings are unique. This is a product of differentiating too much. This leads them to conclude that others cannot possibly understand their thoughts and feelings and that they are invulnerable to danger. They feel that rules that apply to others do not apply to them. Adolescent egocentrism may persist when adolescents have insecure relationship with their parents that may make them self-conscious and lacking in self-confidence. In conclusion, it can be said that one of the main point of Piaget's theory is that creating knowledge and intelligence is an inherently active process. Piaget's theory of cognitive development helped to add our understanding of children's intellectual growth. It also stressed that children are not merely passive recipients of knowledge. Instead, kids are constantly investigating and experimenting as they build their understanding on how the world works. Now let us summarize what we have learnt in today's lesson. Piaget, who is best known for his theory of cognitive development, he discovered that children think and reason differently at different periods in their lives. According to Piaget, cognitive development takes place through stages which occurred in a fixed order and which are universal. Although every normal child passes through the stages in exactly the same order, there is some variability in the ages in which children attain each stage. The four stages of Piaget's theory of cognitive development are sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage and formal operational stage. Each of these stages has major cognitive tasks which must be accomplished. In the sensory stage, the mental structures are mainly concerned with mastery of concrete objects. The mastery of symbols takes place in pre-operational stage when children begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and develop language as a tool for thinking. In the concrete stage, children learn mastery of classes, relations and numbers and how to reason. The last stage deals with mastery of thought. The skills of former operational stage, ability to manipulate mentally, ability to think about things changing in the future, ability to hypothesize about a logical sequence of possible events, ability to anticipate consequences of the actions, having the capacity to detect the logical consistency or inconsistency in a set of statements, and the ability to think in a relativistic way about themselves.